Welcome back to Brain Chatter, where we listen past the daily noise and explore topics at the intersection of leadership, workplace culture, profit, and sustainability. I'm your host, Derek Brown. Today's topic is a bull in the china shop and emotional intelligence. I suspect we've all heard the old adage, a bull in the china shop, especially when it is used to describe someone whose presence and behavior are significantly damaging. It's an adage with a clear visual. If you've ever seen a 2,000-pound bull up close at a farm or a rodeo, it is not difficult to imagine what would happen if it even calmly walked around in a small shop selling china, such as breakable teacups, bowls, and plates. And that's just walking around, bumping into shelves without any care or attention to the damage wake. And then, what if the bull gets mad and starts to run around or ram or buck? Emotional intelligence is a term heard more and more often over the past couple of decades, and yet still, many very intelligent and successful people have never heard this term, yet they may very well know it by other names. If someone's behavior is described as being like a bull in a china shop, it is very probable that this person has a very low emotional intelligence. And like the bull himself, the costs of a person behaving like a bull in a china shop can be very steep. Bulls in china shops sooner or later cost the shop owner a tremendous amount, maybe even cost the owner their entire business and more. Bulls in china shops run off the best employees. They run off the paying customers, even the loyal ones. And as for the bull, well, things don't usually go well for him either in the end. In this episode, I'll be interviewing two of my coworkers, Whitney Tate and Delcia Petersen. We work together at Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated, producer of this podcast. This episode is all about strategies to help all of us avoid being or becoming a bull in a china shop as it relates to emotional intelligence. This episode is just over 30 minutes long. Thank you for listening. Delcia, welcome as a guest to your first episode of Brain Chatter. And let me start with a question for you. Please provide a definition of emotional intelligence, or known by another name, emotional IQ.
Thank you so much, Derek. I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited to talk about emotional intelligence today. A simple definition of emotional intelligence is being able to read and understand the emotions in others as they are presented, and being able to identify and manage those emotions in yourself when they arise. Emotional intelligence is simply something that isn't talked about enough for the level of importance it holds.
Thank you. Whitney, welcome back to your second episode of Brain Chatter. Would you summarize how a high or low emotional IQ can impact someone's success at work and in their career trajectory?
Thank you, Derek. It is good to be back. I'm happy to be here. First of all, Delcia, great definition of emotional intelligence. And it does matter a great deal, just as Delcia mentioned, because it involves other people. So business is built on relationships between people, and someone with a high emotional intelligence, they're going to be more savvy in developing and maintaining relationships that benefit everyone involved. So if we kind of look at the bigger perspective, humans are emotional beings, and when we interact with one another, we're interacting with emotions. So if you compare that to something like developing a skill for a task, so if you think about learning something new, like I don't know, maybe a formula in a spreadsheet or a new business strategy or concept, or if you're in school, you're learning a math problem. You have emotions, but that spreadsheet, that book, that strategy, that concept you're learning, it doesn't have emotions. To contrast it with the technical skills, it's understanding and navigating those emotions in yourself and regulating, but adding that extra layer of how you interact with other people. So why is that important in the workplace? If you want to grow in terms of your responsibility, in terms of maybe you want to work on a project with a larger budget or a certain committee, or maybe you want to be a part of the management team, all of those things are typically going to involve more people. So if you're solely focusing on becoming an expert in one area, but not expanding your skills to be able to garner buy-in, to influence people, and to really develop that team cohesion, it's going to be a risk for the organization to give you that extra responsibility.
Delcia, would you give a few practical examples of how someone with low emotional IQ might interact with someone else at work in a way that prevents the establishment of trust or erodes trust?
Yes, so building trust is an essential component to emotional intelligence. Let's say a coworker respectfully disagrees with something that I said and then presented to me an opposing view. If I had low EI, then I would refuse to try to understand where they're coming from. I'm not seeing their point of view, and I'm possibly even blaming them for not listening to me. Someone with low EI could easily become argumentative, have emotional outbursts, and struggle with active listening. Another example could be somebody thinking a friend is overly sensitive and they actually just don't understand how that friend feels. They aren't actually taking the time to put themselves in the other's shoes. Instead, they brush off whatever is being said because they are just assuming their friend's being dramatic. Interactions like these, they'll eventually strip away that trust over time or even prevent it from building trust in the first place.
Whitney, would you talk about how emotional IQ connects with overall IQ and also connects to applied IQ or common sense? And can you also describe what high emotional IQ looks like as far as when we see it, what are we looking for?
Yeah, so excellent point because they're intertwined in a way that is pretty unique. So those traditional IQ tests, they're going to measure things like our memory, our spatial recognition, our analytical skills, and they were developed in an education setting to help better understand a student's progress. And so EI, emotional intelligence, is going to be an aspect of someone's overall IQ, but they're not the same. And just because you have a high IQ does not necessarily equate that you will have developed the skills to have a high emotional intelligence. So, for example, someone may be able to solve really complex math problems, but unable to distinguish between human emotions. And it could be something really big or something more nuanced, such as like anger, excitement. So they may notice that someone is talking faster or louder, but not be able to really understand that there's some like positivity or negativity behind it. So an emotionally intelligent person, as Delcia mentioned, will be empathetic. They'll also be assertive and self-aware, motivated, optimistic. They're going to foster environments where people are willing to speak up and assert themselves too. And they're going to remain calm in stressful situations and when they encounter difficult people. Something that I've noticed and really value throughout our work and through research as well, but that an emotionally intelligent person isn't going to necessarily press someone else's buttons, or another way to phrase it is like fan the fire. So if they see someone else being overly emotional, they remain calm in stressful situations. And when they encounter someone who is maybe having an outburst, they don't press their buttons or fan the fire, so to say. They handle those situations with tact. And this may be a little bit of an oversimplification, but in my experience, emotionally intelligent people, they really tend to put others at ease. And that's just a natural outcome of understanding yourself.
Delcia, a big part of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Two examples I personally notice over and over in someone with low emotional intelligence is one, interrupting in a conversation before the other person finishes their sentence. Or two, not giving another person their full attention. Perhaps someone walks up to them and they continue to type on their computer or work with a piece of equipment, never turning to give the other person their full attention. I think many people who do these things never realize how much trust they undermine with their own low self-awareness of this. And maybe nothing undermines someone else feeling valued by another more than being denied full, respectful attention. So, my question is, what is a good strategy for increasing self awareness of this for all of us?
Yeah, you are exactly right, Derek. It does start with self-awareness. And self-awareness, it's not just about identifying your emotions and actions, but understanding why you're experiencing them and the impact they have on others. So, our emotions affect our environment. And by creating an environment where members of the organization can become self aware is always important. A good strategy to increase self awareness is to simply check in with yourself. Pay attention to your thoughts and feelings in your current environment objectively in real time and identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. When you understand your strengths and weaknesses, it helps you better accept yourself and allows you to develop skills and strategies for future development. And in addition to all of this, I believe what is the most helpful part of self awareness is to seek out and solicit feedback from those that you trust, those who will give you constructive, honest feedback. With feedback, you hear perceptions of others and compare it to your own perceptions of yourself, and you may find a difference. When someone you trust points out that you aren't giving them their full attention, then they're bringing awareness of what might not have been apparent to you. Feedback is a gift, so use it frequently.
Excellent points. Thank you very much. Whitney, taking on a different element of emotional intelligence from what Delcia just discussed, the lack of regulating emotional reactions is another way someone may demonstrate low emotional intelligence. Would you give an example of this and discuss strategies to move the bar on this part of emotional IQ?
I'd be happy to, Derek. So, this is something I think everyone can relate to. If we're being honest with ourselves, we've all had moments where we did not regulate our emotions, and we've all experienced moments in conversations where other people are failing to regulate their emotions. So, as good old Taylor Swift would say, we've all been the archer, we've all been the prey. So, welcome to the human experience. One personal example that comes to mind, and I want to share this just because I do think it captures the nuances of what we're talking about, because I think we can see it when they're like really in our face and outburst, but to really get down to that self awareness that Delcia was talking about earlier, this really happened to me, and I'll share it with you. But I was working with a colleague, and she asked me about a problem she was having in Excel. And I was frustrated, to be frank, for no apparent reason other than I was in the middle of a task and I didn't want to be bothered because I was focused, and sometimes I hyper focus. It is what it is. I'm more aware of it now. But she was kind and she just needed a little assistance. And I said to her, I literally said this to someone. I said, "What do you need help with now?" And after I said it, I was like, I saw the look on her face and I was embarrassed because I allowed my frustration to manage my words instead of me managing my frustration. And I know it's a very simple example, but it really does capture the nuances of what we're talking about. Developing emotional intelligence means moving past the emotion and saying something like, "Oh, can I send this one email? Then I'll take a look at it." And it's beneficial not only for me and her, but also for our relationship. So how do we move that bar? It's not exactly what everyone wants to hear, but these things have certainly helped me. And it's ensuring that I'm eating enough protein, getting outside, getting exercise, and getting enough rest, getting enough water, and really focusing on gratitude, all those simple pleasures that life brings. But developing those habits are invaluable. And as far as a real time focus, I'd say begin with mindfulness. Spend a week being as fully aware of how you feel throughout your day as humanly possible. What situations cause heart rate change? What comments from other people entice you to respond with a harsh tone? What are all of those things that basically bring out emotions that you didn't realize you were feeling in real time. And when you do this, you're then able to identify it, and then you can create space for how you choose to respond. Thank you for letting me quote Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah.
It was great.
Thank you, Delcia.
It was great.
Derek, was it great?
It was interesting, yes. Whitney, excellent points. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I never in 1,000 years thought that Taylor Swift quotes would sneak into this podcast. So a quote from celebrity that I admire a lot, that is Dolly Parton. And she says, if you don't like the road you're walking, start paving another one. And
there you go.
That ties into this next question that I have for you, Whitney, which is, we proposed in the intro of this episode that raising one's emotional intelligence can make their own work and personal life better and make the lives of the people around them better. Would you describe how this is true, how putting effort into this can create results, and how to do that?
I love your song quote because it's like, yes, you're paving a new road. For me, it's like you're going back, you have all these potholes. You're like, I got to fill these in. I'm moving this way, moving that way. And you're right. It's so true. And it's true for me in my personal experience. I've heard it from the clients that we've worked with over the years. Emotions can just be a lot. And rather than ignoring or diminishing them, once we accept them for what they are, a part of the human experience, it takes a level of stress off of us. And I think that is one way in which it makes our lives better. We can then work through the emotion opposed to trying to argue with ourselves that we need to feel something or we should feel something else. Oftentimes we don't get to choose how we feel. And so emotional intelligence is choosing how I think about and leverage my emotions for the best possible outcome. So not only will it relieve stress for me, but it also takes a level of pressure off of our relationships. I get to be responsible for my emotions, and you get to be responsible for your emotions. And that having no sense of emotional dependency, it's nice. It's just really freeing.
Delcia, you recently completed a master's in industrial organizational psychology at Angelo State University in Texas. Would you talk about how emotional IQ is being currently presented in higher education? And what are current students being told about how to expect emotional intelligence to impact their future career success?
Yeah. And Derek, I wish I could answer this question with a song quote, but I got nothing right now. But yeah, my experience is that we are all talking about emotional intelligence. And maybe that's because my degree was psychology based, but it's definitely a key topic throughout our discussions with organizational development, the leadership strategies, those motivation theories, and so on. We've also talked a lot about what is it going to look like entering the workforce and learning the ever-changing approaches to personnel selection. We've learned that it is increasingly more common for companies to hire people for their character rather than their skill. So to hire people based on what you can't train and training them to develop hard skills. You can't train character, but you can train skill. Character training is up to the individual. So you can character train, but it's based on their own strong desire for significant personal development and improvement. That's where emotional intelligence is grown. So once you learn and practice those components of emotional IQ, the more people are going to gravitate towards you, and those companies are going to want to hire you. Skill and experience are important, but it's not everything. And we did talk a lot about that throughout the years that I was getting my master's there. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and great points. Delcia, you are a Gen Z. Whitney is a millennial. I'm right on the cusp of the end of Gen X and the beginning of millennial and social scientists don't agree what 1979 babies even are. Maybe some sort of mini generation of aliens to somebody, to everybody.
Not to me.
Thank you, question. What do studies and surveys say about the different generations? Is there any evidence that there is a generational component to emotional IQ and uniqueness to how each generation broadly sees emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so we've heard those terms such as soft skills, people skills, street versus book smart, etc. The literature tells us, and the studies, that the perception and importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace vary between those age groups and those generations of all the different types of names that people call these generations. Like you said, the aliens. The boomer generation believes that cognitive intelligence is more important than emotional intelligence. And then we see those middle two generations, the Gen X and Gen Y, they seem to believe that the cognitive and emotional intelligence, those are about as equally important. And then we see those younger generations, so the Gen Z, and they believe that emotional intelligence is more important than cognitive intelligence. And they believe that by almost 20% more than the two previous generations. However, even though the youngest generation believes that emotional intelligence is the most important, it was also found that as age increased, so did emotional intelligence. So the younger generations don't have as much EI as those boomers, but that's because of the life experience levels those older generations have gone through to increase and enhance their emotional intelligence compared to those younger generations, but not by much. So each generation has a grasp on the idea of emotional intelligence, but may view it differently, as you mentioned. The older generations, they did not actively seek out the link between work and emotional intelligence, and we can see how the newer generations, they're starting to push the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace and society in general. And earlier, to Whitney's point too, the way we carry ourselves and become highly emotional intelligent people, it starts with those daily practices of health, those physical, the mind, the body. We can all be that person that we want to be around in the workplace and outside the workplace, and it's all more connected than people may realize.
Fascinating and very insightful. Thank you for that. Whitney, you are in the final stages of completing your PhD.
Whoop, whoop.
Yay!
Certainly celebration worthy.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot of academic effort measuring quantifiable elements that touch the workplace. Over the past several years, you've spent lots of effort on that. Will you talk about how emotional intelligence is quantified in both individuals and also in teams?
Ooh, such a good question, Derek. I'll briefly touch on individuals, but the teams one is an interesting answer. So I want to be sure I get to that. But individually, there are inventories, and the three of us know our firm uses the emotional quotient inventory, the EQI, and it's a self-report measure, which is probably the most practical for businesses and industry. What I have found most helpful, and this goes back to something Delcia mentioned earlier, is the importance of feedback. So there's also a 360 version of that. And essentially you rate yourself, and then it compiles a comparative report from different areas in your life. So if people report to you, your peers, family and friends, whatever that looks like, the person you report to. And I think that is essential and helpful, because when we receive that feedback from people we trust and respect, there will always be a gap between the way we view ourselves and the way people experience us. And the better we can understand that gap, the better we can make realistic goals that are beneficial to us and our team. So that's kind of the individual one. For teams, though, teams are interesting. Just because you put 10 emotionally intelligent people in a room, it doesn't automatically yield an emotionally intelligent team. A team is going to have characteristics of its own and is going to create its own norms and habits. So, to the degree to which everyone on the team is willing to work at earning trust is going to determine how healthy those habits and norms can be, like the potential for them. And I think we've all experienced this in the workplace. We will be on some teams and it will be made up of pretty emotionally intelligent people, maybe people who are really good at self-regulation and are aware of other people's emotions, but there's just something missing about sharing their ideas. So you'll be on a Zoom call or you'll be in a meeting and there may be one person talking the entire time, sharing all of their ideas and just everyone kind of agreeing. But then you take the majority of that team and put them on another Zoom call, and maybe they're working on a different project. And it's a space where everyone asserts themselves and everyone forgives one another for the mistakes that they made, and they hold one another accountable in a very constructive way. It's so important because of the social dynamic that a team has versus just your individual dynamic when you operate as one person. You can't just take the average of everyone's emotional intelligence because of that social dynamic. And the last thing I'll say about this, because I feel like I'm talking a lot, is that it also can't be the average because a lot of times it's going to be driven by the leader. So whether that's a formal leader or someone in an informal leadership role, if their emotional intelligence is right below the technical average of the team, that's going to bring down the team's ability to work together in a constructive way because of their influence on the norms and the habits.
Delcia, when it comes to a for-profit company, do teams that are populated with highly emotional, intelligent leaders and team members have a competitive advantage? And if yes, why and how does that play out?
Yes, I certainly believe so. And people want to work with highly emotional, intelligent people, especially in the dynamic that Whitney had just described. It makes life easier. Some key factors that contribute to team effectiveness isn't about the skill sets or the qualifications that I had mentioned earlier. It's about those learning behaviors, open-mindedness, trust, and other forms of psychological safety on a team. Working in an environment where team members feel safe to take healthy risks, be appropriately vulnerable, and respectfully speak up and say things without fear of retribution will go farther than a team that focuses on those highly technical skills. And they don't really prioritize treating their people with dignity and respect. This would not be a sustainable way to be treated, and it would not be an enjoyable place to work, that's for sure. In fact, more internal problems may arise in a company that does not maintain a space where emotional intelligence is valued, and people will leave, and the organization might suffer because of that. A team where people are aware of thoughts, emotions, and challenges will result in a more cohesive team and be more inclined to reach those organizational goals and overall enhance team performance.
Thank you very much. Whitney, there's a common misnomer that emotional intelligence is just a so-called soft skill. But based on how much it impacts somebody's life and career, it seems that there's a very strong case to be made that it's actually a critical skill. Would you speak to this?
Yes, and I completely agree with that. It is a critical skill, and refusing to understand your emotions and to look at the whole scope of this. I'm talking about all of your emotions, like what brings you joy, all the happiness, all the gratitude that you feel, everything to the fears, the anger, the envy. If you refuse to understand or acknowledge your emotions and how they impact your behavior, you're going to eventually become the bull. And it's critical because if you don't understand your emotions, they're going to creep out in unexpected, often passive, and very hurtful ways. And another reason that it's critical is because of its relationship to grit. If you think of your personal success and you conceptualize what grit is, it's essentially your ability to bounce back from adversity. Our personal success and our workplace success is going to have that factor in it. So to what degree am I able to learn from and overcome obstacles and setbacks or failures? And the aspects of emotional intelligence, such as my self-awareness or my impulse control, my independence, my flexibility, all of those, if I have not developed those skills, it's going to be very difficult for me to bounce back when adversity arises.
Thank you. Delcia, if someone has been called a bull in a china shop because of their damaging behavior and they want to change, they take accountability for themselves on that, they want to change, they're likely to experience some doubt and suspicion by those around them who they may have negatively impacted in the past. Earning somebody's trust after breaking it can be hard. What would you say to somebody who is genuinely trying to change and in turn treat others more respectfully as a new pattern of behavior?
Derek, can I just be honest with you for a second? This is the first time I've heard the phrase "a bull in the china shop."
What?
But
Okay.
but it paints a really good picture. It really does. And change isn't easy. And in order to earn the trust and respect of those around you, you have to make the effort to do what it takes to show them that you care and that you want to change, that you are actively trying. If you can try to be mindful, empathetic, flexible, self-aware, then you can get there. It's like that saying, choose your heart. You can choose to let everything in your life, bog you down, choose to complain about it, or you can choose optimism and positivity. Both paths are going to be hard, but which one do you want more? You can choose to second guess everything you say and do and rely on others for everything, or you can choose to set yourself free from emotional dependency. You can choose to ignore conflict, or you can choose to work on a mutually satisfying relationship. It's your choice. Which difficult direction will you ultimately earn the trust of others, set you up for success, and better your outlook on life? You can't control what others say and think about you. So that person that you've hurt in the past because of your actions, that person that you broke trust with by making a mistake, if they're not willing to see you as you are now and that you're trying, and they can only see you as you were, then there's really nothing you can do to change their mind. You just have to keep working on you. Be consistent and be accountable. Have people in your life to give you feedback, and don't give up when you slip up. We aren't expected to be perfect, but we are expected to be accountable.
Excellent points. Thank you very much, Delcia. Whitney, will you close us out? Where is the starting point for someone who wants to raise their emotional intelligence? And other than sharing this podcast episode with someone, what other resources would you recommend as being helpful to somebody who really genuinely needs that starting point to raise their emotional intelligence?
Before I answer this, I have had so much fun with you two, and then I will dive into this.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? I'm going to do another song lyric. So I don't know how to say this band, even though I really like them. It's either Avett or Avett Brothers. And as cheesy as this is, there's a song lyric, and it simply says, decide what to be and go be it. That's where you have to begin. And as Delcia mentioned, you just have to keep working on you. So in that, you decide what to be, and then you just go after and be it, and then be prepared for the discomfort. Understanding and working through your emotions in real time, it takes courage, it takes humility, and it takes commitment. And it means that you have to be honest with yourself and fully accept the responsibility for how you feel, and absolutely refusing under any circumstances to take it out on anyone else. And then also creating that space for other people to feel exactly how they feel and not try to manage their emotions. And something that really resonates with me is that other people's behavior is rarely about you. Other people's behavior is about them. Just like my behavior isn't about you, Derek or Delcia, my behavior is about me. beginning there and separating those concepts, I think is very helpful. And then from there, Delcia kicked us off and talked about the feedback. Just ensure that you find a confidant, someone who is willing to be honest with you no matter what. Ask them the hard questions. Ask them to really dive in and give you details and practical examples. And it just takes time to develop those relationships. And they're rare. And we're fortunate enough if we find 2 or 3 people like that throughout our lifetime. And then you asked me something else. Resources, right? Books.
Yes.
Oh, I do have one. It isn't explicitly about EI, but it's in more of an implicit way. And this is a really good read. It's called The Social Animal. It's by David Brooks. And it dives into success and essentially it has a lot of psychological resources on why we do the things we do and how people respond. So again, it isn't explicitly around emotional intelligence, but in an implicit way, it's worth checking out.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Brain Chatter is a production of Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated. We assist clients across North America and beyond with leadership development, corporate culture transformation initiatives, behavior-based professional development for health and safety issues, individual and team assessments, conflict and performance management, succession planning, and team building. Making a difference in organizations and individuals' lives for over 40 years. Learn more at leaderscode.com. Please consider ranking and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts.